Episode 12 of Life on Earth is called Life in the Trees, and it's all about primates. So this episode opens up in Madagascar, where we see lemurs. So we explore lemurs because they're among the most primitive types of primates alive today. They highlight how lemurs used to be much more widespread around the world. However, as the continent separated, Madagascar was separated off as an island from the coast of Africa. This was basically a refuge for lemurs, which otherwise went extinct elsewhere because they were competed with other primates like monkeys. And we see quite a few lemurs, and we highlight the lemur life and the differences between lemurs and other primates, especially the simiiforms. So the most striking thing about lemurs is probably their faces. They've got wet noses. Obviously no simiiforms have a wet nose, and neither do tarsiers, but lemurs, bush babies and lorises all do, and it comes down to the fact that they're actually more reliant on their noses than we are. Lemurs still have scent glands, something that was sort of evolved out in later primates, but otherwise they do still have that traditional primate life. A lot of them do live in the trees. We explored various types of lemurs. The shifaka is highlighted as being among the best jumpers. The indri is the largest, and it's obviously by far the loudest of all the lemurs. And the ring-tailed lemur is obviously the most famous. It's more social than a lot of other species of lemur. So in a way, we can look at all these species of lemur and we can kind of relate them to other primates that we're more familiar with, I think. And then we leave Madagascar and we go to the forests of the Far East, where we see some of the other wet-nosed primates, and those are the lorises. So lorises, like bush babies, which are also kind of closely related to them, and lemurs, are nocturnal. And you can tell by looking at them, their eyes are really big to see in the dark. They're obviously quite slow-moving. Lorises, I don't think had been seen too often at the time, and to be fair, you don't really see that much footage of lorises. I think lorises have become quite famous now because of the pet trade, but I think that it was good. It was good to see them. It was interesting. And we highlight tarsiers briefly. They're actually a bit more closely related to us than they are to lemurs, bush babies and lorises, because they don't have wet noses, but their lifestyle is very much like that of a loris and a bush baby, and they're not that much more intelligent. And then we move on to the monkeys, specifically the New World monkeys. We highlight the most primitive types of New World monkeys, and those are the marmosets. They do look very different. They're obviously much smaller, generally not as intelligent as a lot of larger species of monkeys are. And we see these marmosets foraging. They forage in a wide variety of stuff, insects, loads of other small things. They actually spend a lot of the time eating tree sap. They basically drum on the side of the tree and will suck out the gum that comes out of it. And we don't see too many different types of marmosets. It's just the one type, which, you know, is fine. It does a good job of highlighting the point. And then we see larger species of New World monkeys, like the squirrel monkey, which is kind of like your average monkey. I think if you had to draw a generic monkey, it would be either a squirrel monkey or a capuchin. Howler monkeys as well are highlighted as being among the most adapted to life in the trees. Everything about a monkey is pretty well adapted to life in the trees. Obviously the grasping hands are pretty essential for holding in the branches, and they do highlight that in the lemurs as well, something that I hadn't really thought about. It's actually really essential for baby primates because they can just hold on to their parents as they're travelling through the trees or on the ground, and that actually becomes very important to later in the episode, and I'll get to that. Howler monkeys are obviously established as being very loud. They're among the loudest mammals on Earth. They're certainly the loudest terrestrial mammal. You see their use of prehensile tails. Obviously not very many monkeys have them, though some New World monkeys do. The howler monkey is among those. It's a pretty good thing to have for a life in the trees, and as they say, they're among the best adapted to a life in the trees. All the stuff with the howler monkeys was quite interesting. Watching them foraging as well, it's quite good to highlight how colour is really essential to monkeys. Monkeys are the most colourful types of mammals on Earth, and that is simply because colour vision is something that they really need to identify whether food is worth eating or not. And then we go to the Old World, where we start focusing on monkeys that kind of leave the trees behind, but from this point on, the life in the trees part isn't a major part of the episode. It's mainly about life on the ground, if nothing else. We see vervets briefly, and then we highlight baboons, which are obviously the best adapted to life on the ground. We highlight their social order, the way they forage, the fact that they'll eat a wide variety of things, the way they fight. It's interesting. You get a good look at the baboons. I think it's quite interesting. And then we start talking about macaques. So macaques are probably the most widespread of all the Old World monkeys. You do tend to find them kind of all over the place. You find them in Gibraltar. We highlight the Barbary macaques that were brought there by the Romans and still live there today. And then we go to Japan, where we see the Japanese macaques. And the music's really good here because it's very Japanese. The music has been quite good in this series of adopting instruments from the countries they're in, like the kangaroo stuff a couple episodes ago featured a lot of didgeridoos. And it's actually quite nice seeing the Japanese macaques just bathing in the hot springs. I don't know if that had been seen before this series. I feel like there's a lot of things in this series that we kind of take for granted because it's been filmed so much since, but I actually don't know if that had been filmed before. It was probably pretty cool at the time. And what was more interesting than the Japanese macaques in the hot springs was the ones on the beach. We see this troop of Japanese macaques on this little island where Attenborough really develops the idea of culture outside of humans. We tend to think of culture as being a strictly human thing. Culture is defined as any trait that can be transferred between individuals through non-genetic means. That is quite a wide range of stuff, I would say. In this instance, we see one female who took sweet potatoes and actually started washing them to, wash the sand off them, because why would you want to eat sandy potatoes? And then all the other macaques, which weren't doing that before, started copying her. And then before long, all of them are doing this. And even when the potatoes aren't dirty, they'll still wash them in the sea. And then we see when they introduced rice as well, the macaques were generally a bit clueless because, the rice mixed with the sand, it was hard to eat. However, the same female just took a handful of rice and sand, dropped it in the water, and all the sand obviously dropped and the rice floated. And then, much like they did with the potatoes, all the macaques started copying her. This is how culture forms. And it is really interesting. I think it's a really, really good part of the episode. Probably one of the more underrated parts because it does get overshadowed by something that happens later in the episode. I thought that was very good. And what was really good about that is that they related it back to the stuff about young primates being able to hold on to their mother, because these things spread a lot easier when the young monkeys are able to see their parents do these things, which allows culture to be spread between generations. And that's obviously something that we do. Attenborough says there's no reason to deny the fact that other primates, like monkeys, do this, as they so clearly do. Then we move away from monkeys and towards apes. So we see orangutans in Borneo. That's good. We don't spend a lot of time with them. We do use orangutans to highlight the thing that is most iconic about apes, and that's the fact that they don't have tails. The reason is that they have much longer and much stronger arms for swinging through the trees. So when you think about it, monkeys don't actually swing through the trees generally. A lot of them jump, some of them clamber. They don't really swing though. Because apes have ditched the tail, they've really had to rely on this. And that is really interesting. It's not something I think the average person would think about, but it is an undeniable fact. And then we move on to gibbons, which are obviously the most accomplished swingers in the animal kingdom. Anytime you see gibbons just swinging through the trees, it is really impressive. It's really entertaining, I think. That's why gibbons are so popular in zoos, to be honest. But it is really good. I really like the gibbon stuff in this episode. And then we highlight the other apes. So we spend quite a lot of time, very famously, with gorillas in this episode. Gorillas are pretty great here, and this is actually a really important bit of footage, not only because it's probably the most famous thing that Attenborough ever did. It was actually really important for shifting opinions of gorillas. So up to this point, gorillas were seen as a sort of symbol of sort of bestial rage. Generally, people thought of gorillas as like King Kong, which is obviously a monster. Gorillas were generally seen in a very negative light compared to other primates. But this sequence really just turns that on its head. It's Attenborough just mingling with this troop of gorillas, and it's just so peaceful. Just watching them forage, watching them playing with each other, they're wrestling. It's all just really nice. And the best part is obviously when Attenborough is just playing with the gorillas himself. This one gorilla just lies on top of him. He's just having the time of his life. It's really great watching Attenborough just having a good time interacting with nature. Like, he's always got a big smile on his face, and this is the biggest smile he's ever had in his face in one of these series, because he's just having a great time. And there was so much of this footage that didn't even make it into the episode. There's a lot on the cutting room floor that they just didn't bother showing because they were like, well, it's not really relevant to the episode. And he was like, yeah, but this was on for ages. It was great. I really wish I was able to see an extended version of that footage, but it is pretty tremendous. It's great. And I think after this episode, it was really undeniable to a lot of people that gorillas were actually peaceful. And Attenborough's monologue is tremendous as well. It basically says that it is very odd that humans have chosen gorillas to represent violence and aggression when that is something that gorillas generally aren't, and we definitely are. I think that's really powerful. I think that's a really, really good sequence. This sequence is obviously very famous because it's Attenborough playing with the gorillas, but it is actually really important for so many other reasons. It really was great, and it is, the best part of the series. It's probably one of the best parts of Attenborough's career. It is really great, and if you haven't seen it, which you probably have, it's just worth watching. It's really amazing. It's really, really good. And then we move on to chimpanzees. And the chimpanzee stuff is good. It's not as good as the gorillas. I think we do highlight how chimpanzees are more intelligent than gorillas. They're the second most intelligent animals as far as we're aware. We see them using tools. We see them interacting with each other. And you do get a sense of how our ancestors were a bit like them. And then Attenborough talks about how there was one species of ape that basically stood upright, walked into the plains, and found that all the adaptations that were necessary for life in the trees were actually really handy for life on the ground as well, which is something we kind of lead up to as the episode goes on. And that's obviously what the next episode is going to be about. And the last footage we get is a sort of mini montage bouncing between humans doing things like brushing their hair, breastfeeding, just chattering, and then chimpanzees and gorillas doing the exact same things. It's really good. It does a really good job of showing you that while we like to distance ourselves from our animal cousins, especially the primates, because we know they're a bit like them, but we don't like to think of us as being like them, a lot of the similarities are undeniable. And I think that's just a really, really good way of ending this episode. So yeah, this episode is great. It is probably Is it the best episode of the series? It might be. Definitely got the best bit of the series in it, with the gorillas, obviously. But this episode is really great. The narrative structure of it is very good. I think everything it highlights is very good. Again, it's even more contained than previous episodes were. If you only watch one episode of this series, you definitely watch this one. It is very good. It's very, very good. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think of this episode, what you think of this video. Let me know, and I'll be doing the next one next week, which is the last one, which is all about humans. So we'll see where that goes. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want it. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.